And welcome to Education, Leadership, and Beyond, Surviving and Thriving. My name is Andrew Murata, host of the show. It's show number 43, and happy to be back on air, happy to be on Facebook Live, and happy to be back with the show. Excited to be here. We had to make some changes in the show, so I am not in the handy-dandy radio studio anymore. We were not able to continue that. But we are going to continue with Education, Leadership, and Beyond, Surviving and Thriving. And here we are. We're using the Be Live format, which is broadcasting over Facebook Live, as well as on iTunes. And it's show number 43. So happy to be back and excited to get this going. So we've made a couple of changes in the show. One is we've reached out to some sponsors, and we did get our first sponsor. So very much appreciate Dan Spanauer with the Coaching and Leadership Journal. He's our first sponsor of Education, Leadership, and Beyond. And Dan is a high school teacher and coach in North Carolina. And this is his group here, the Leadership Publishing Team. This is a great resource. They actually featured today's guest in here a couple of times, but there are a number of great articles. This comes out monthly, and Dan sends a hard copy to you as well as an electronic version. And again, it's called the Coaching and Leadership Journal. Fantastic. And Dan offered the listeners of Education, Leadership, and Beyond a discount. And that discount, if you have your pen, is ELB20. ELB20. If you go to the leadershippublishingteam.com and punch that in, you will get a 20% discount. It comes out 12 times a year, once a month. And this is the April version here. So great stuff. And we appreciate Dan and the work he does and him sponsoring the program. That being said, it is show number 43, and our guest today, he'll be up in a few minutes, is Dan Rockwell. He is the leadership freak. That's right. The leadership freak is on Education, Leadership, and Beyond. He'll be coming up in the next few minutes. So I did feature one of Dan's, and I'm going to mess with this mic here. Forgive me. How's that, everybody? I think that sounds a little bit better. But we did feature Dan in this in one of his blogs. And the topic for today's show is Do Your Job. And Dan is reading the book, and he finished it now. It's called The Education of a Coach by David Halberstam. And the book was about Bill Belichick. And when you meet Dan, you know, he sends out a blog daily on the leadershipfreak.com. And it's great stuff. Really great. I've gotten to know Dan here in the past few months, and he was kind enough to come on the program. And he's got great information. So I was happy to share that on today's program. But this blog specifically hit home to me. And again, the title was Do Your Job, based on the book, The Education of a Coach by David Halberstam, written about Bill Belichick, or written with Bill Belichick. And he gave some 3 points in there in the blog that I did want to highlight and personalize here on the program. So the first one, obviously the name of it, is called Do Your Job, right? Think about that in your work, in your field. If everyone just did their job without incident, without complaining, it would be so much easier, right? Things would work. It'd be smooth. Bill Belichick references his father in the book, and Dan writes about that and the lessons that he taught him. He never told Bill that he had to work hard. He just did it. He modeled it for him. And it made me think about some of the stories with my dad. If you've been listening to the program, or if you know me, my dad meant the world to me. My parents, just amazing. And one story in particular, my dad owned his own pharmacy in Staten Island. Tompkinsville, New York, Rexall Drugs, an old-fashioned pharmacy. And his partner one time got sick, and it was a period about 6 months. And my dad not only then ran the shop for 6 months straight, 7 days a week, he took his partner's salary and put that in the bank for him. And as a young kid, I couldn't understand. I mean, I understood covering for your partner, but I said, Dad, you're earning that money. You know, why is that money? Why isn't it going into our family? Why isn't it going to you? And he talked about the concept of supporting his colleague and supporting him through this hard time, and that he needed to earn money for his family too. And they were partners, all of that stuff. And I never forgot that about, you know, working hard and that concept of that. So one of the things I always admired about my dad, again, certainly modeling the way. Another thing Dan talks about in the blog, again, this is the March 3rd blog that Dan wrote, and he talked about doing the work, right? Working hard, do the work, do your job, simply just don't point the way. So one of the things is getting your hands dirty, right? Maybe stepping outside your comfort zone and getting your hands dirty. I talk about that in my book too, about not being afraid to step outside the box and do some things. If there's a spill in the hallway, you might not necessarily always need to call a custodian. Take care of it yourself. The kids see that, the staff sees that, and they know you're invested in it. So Dan talks about that in the book. Don't look down on others that might have a different job than you. Maybe it's not at the same level. And respect the work, do the work. I remember a story listening to Dr. Gilbert on the Success Hotline. He talked about a newspaper reporter went to the first mission to the moon, right? All of the excitement that was there. And he interviewed the astronauts, the reporter interviewed a number of people, and he bumped into a custodian in the hallway at the NASA headquarters. And he said, "Oh, hello, sir." And they greeted each other. And he said, what do you do here? And it was a custodian doing their job. And the custodian answered, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." Now think about that. That person had buy-in. That person felt part of something bigger than himself. So it goes along the lines of treating everyone fairly and making people feel good about their jobs. The second thing that Dan writes about in that blog, and again, he's coming up here shortly, Dan Rockwell, the leadership freak, support others while they work. Again, a concept he took out of the book here, The Education of a Coach by David Halberstam. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Support others while they're working. Dan writes, challenge and cheer. What a great concept. Dan, I'm going to take that into my job. I think that's great. And you want to continue to raise your people up. You want to keep pushing them, but making sure that they feel validated along the way and feel your support along that. And the last concept he writes about in this blog is removing the obstacles. If you're the leader of that group and you have people working under you or working with you, there's always obstacles. There's always things that are going to come up. Even simple things like the heat is not working correctly. There's not enough light in the room. Just today in my school, have a great dynamic teacher. I'm a high school principal, if you didn't know that. But I have a dynamic teacher. That the light was right in front of the smartboard. And she had the lights on the room, but you couldn't see it. It was a bad reflection. We got together, boom, stepped up. I took the top down. We twisted the light bulb, so just that light bulb came out. There was a small barrier. That's a small example, but that happened today. So remove the obstacles. If you are in a position of authority, to eliminate barriers and create connections. And again, these are the words of the leadership freak himself, Dan Rockwell. In his blog, March 3rd, I definitely recommend that you check him out and check out some of his work. His stuff comes out daily, and we're going to meet Dan here in a minute here on Education, Leadership, and Beyond. Excuse me. So again, I did want to take an opportunity before we bring Dan in to introduce today's sponsor. It is the Coaching and Leadership Journal. This is put together by Dan Spanauer and his group at the Leadership Publishing team. Just a great group of articles. It comes out monthly. You get an electronic version, and you also get, this isn't just regular paper. It's kind of like a thicker paper, and it's a little more sturdy. Here's Dan's information on here. You can contact him at the leadershippublishingteam.com. Great stuff. The subscription rate is $149 a year. Dan is offering a discount for the listeners of Education, Leadership, and Beyond, and that is ELB20 if you order online, ELB20, and that is for the Coaching and Leadership Journal. Appreciate Dan sponsoring the program. We're going to meet another Dan here. How about that? Dan, let me see if I can make this work here and bring you in. Bam.
Bam.
There you are.
Hey.
Great to see you, Dan, and welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Andrew.
You've brought a lot to my life, Dan, in the 6 months to a year that I've been following you, including showing me this format, Be Live. So I appreciate that.
Well, it's a pleasure, and thanks for saying that. You're very kind.
Dan, let's get right to it. How did you start the Leadership Freak? Where did this come from, and how long you been doing it?
Well, I wish I could give you a great answer. Like, there was this great plan. I sat down one day under a tree and I planned out my life and all of that. But really, there was no plan. I've been writing Leadership Freak for about a year, and I really it was an experiment. And I said to myself, I think I'll write for 5 days a week for a year and see if it gets traction. But honestly, I had no idea. I'd never really written beyond like business writing and contracts and things like that. And so I just started writing, January 10th, I think it would be. I don't, whatever. Yeah, that would be January 10th. And I just started writing and it got traction. And so I just kept doing it.
Well, you're definitely getting some followers. I found you featured in the Coaching and Leadership Journal, and he highlighted some of your stuff in there. And but your stuff is really terrific. It just seems to hit home. I looked at the VUCA stuff today. That's another conversation, but great. Dan, where'd you come up with the name? In school, the word freak has a negative connotation. Where'd you come up with that?
Yeah, I was thinking like sports freak. Like freakishly interested in something. You're right. And there's something in me that like sometimes likes to push the edge a little bit. So sometimes when I write, I might push the edge, not a lot, but a little, And so I was just sitting down, kind of noodling away at words, and that came up, Leadership Freak. Again, there was no lightning bolt. It was just sort of noodling around a little bit. And then it came up and I went out and I didn't even buy the domain at that time. I mean, I've been using free tools like, WordPress and that kind of stuff. And it was available, of course. And I was so fortunate because, nobody else is going to be Leadership Freak. You type it in, you got me.
There you are. Well, you're making yourself stand out, not just in the name, but also in the content. And speaking of that, tell me about your roles, Dan. I know you've had a number of different leadership roles. Your story in your career. Tell us a little bit about that, because I know that's where you've drawn a lot of your content from.
Absolutely. So I've been here in Williamsport for, almost 30 years, Williamsport, Pennsylvania. I'm a Maine boy originally, central Pennsylvania, but Maine is my home. And I went off to Bible school originally. I don't know if you knew that or not, but I went off to Bible school originally, and I've been involved in church world all my life. Although Leadership Freak is not focused on that. I mean, that's just been part of my life. Then I've worked for over 15 years for the local Penn State affiliate. I did workforce development for them. That meant in my role, I handled staff development for the college. I had some computer labs. I hired faculty to teach. I did outreach to the community. I did adult ed classes. I handled all that kind of stuff. So that was a lot of fun. And that's where really I was at the college when I started writing Leadership Freak. I'm not there now, but I was.
And now part of it, in addition to writing the blog daily, you're doing some public speaking and you do also private coaching. Tell me about that aspect of the Freak.
Yeah, thanks for asking about it. I do. I never realized that there was this business opportunity right? I wasn't smart enough to figure that all out. So I didn't even know. I realize now people call what I do content marketing. I just call it writing blogs, but content marketing. So I think about a year and a half in, I started getting, I got my first invitation to go speak. I had no idea. I thought, wow, this is cool. So I went to speak. And since then, really it's done things for us that we never would have imagined. And then I do coach a group of leaders on a ongoing basis, and that's part of the business as well, which is just such a joy. I'm so thankful for it.
So in line with that, Dan, again, part of my goal is running this podcast and the work we're doing on education, leadership, and beyond is helping people get better, right? We all want to get better, some more than others. So what are some of the areas that you find lacking in leadership? I'm a high school principal by day, and I'm trying to be the best leader I can be for my kids and my staff. But what are some of the biggest areas that you find that are lacking, that you see?
Yeah, well, I get to work with leaders who want to do well and want to improve. And you're one of those kind of leaders. But I think overall in leadership, we get to a certain place in leadership, and then we sort of feel like we've made it. And so one of the first things I like to think about for leaders is self-development. I think you got to start there. How are you developing your leadership? And I like to ask leaders, what are you working on? And if they don't know what they're working on, they're probably not working on anything. And that to me is a big disappointment. We need to be working on things. You see me, I'm right. Last week I wrote about complaining. This morning I wrote about being critical. And so now, I'm trying to say, you know what, I'm going to go an hour without being critical of something. I'm going to go an hour and, only speak words that like build people up and, notice the positives, for a whole hour, which so far I haven't really been able to succeed. But, I'm working at it. And that's what I want to see. I want to see like self-development. I want to see people navigate the tension between results and relationships. I think we tip. Right. So I think that's another one. Some leaders are very results oriented and relationships suffer. And then some leaders are very relationship oriented, but results suffer. And, I also I just want to see, when you think about leaders and the biggest area of lack is I just want to have a little less knowing and a little more curiosity.
Yeah. Asking the question.
Absolutely.
And that'll lead me to my next question here, because I watched your TED Talk and you talked about, again, the coaching and how you kind of draw that out of people, the answer. But what was the TED Talk experience like? Was that that's a pretty big deal to have a TED Talk, correct?
Yeah, I'm so thankful for that. It was one of the local. It was TEDx in Pittsburgh, right? And
not far from you.
No, the prison system has done a few of them. The state prison system, and I happen to know the Secretary of Corrections, and he called me. He said, "Dan, we're doing this. We'd love to have you come and speak." And the thing that really came out of that is you have like 18 minutes or so to like get your message honed down, and that was a great experience to like really hone your message down. I'm pretty high strung and I get nervous and my stomach hurts before I speak and all this kind of stuff. So 18 minutes, boom, you got to get her done. And that was good.
You like the confines of that?
Yeah, it was good. It worked for me. It keeps that baby going. You can't chase too many rabbits on that 18-minute schedule.
So tell me about that. And I appreciate your honesty. Someone at your level, you still get nervous before you speak?
It depends, but I would say, yeah. And, earlier on, it was really like I couldn't sleep the night. I remember one of the first really big engagements I had with 1,500 CEOs. I was in Vegas. I'm trying to sleep. I'm on a different time zone. My stomach hurts. I got other issues that you might have when you're all stressed out, if you know what I'm saying. And it's like, and it's so funny because I finally get up there and, I got my presentation and I'm ready to go and I'm starting to let her rip. And, I don't know, like 5 minutes in, they were laughing and something was going on. And I just said to myself, you got this, man. What are you worried about? Give them your best. I still get nervous, though. What can you say?
Yeah. And that's normal. That's normal. And the more I do it, and I get to do it every day in front of kids and staff, and but I've gotten used to it, and I got a big mouth. Dan, we talked earlier about the coaching, right? And again, I'm into your stuff and what you're doing. And when you have a captive audience that wants to be motivated, it's easier for you. How about with people that might not be receptive to coaching, or people that don't want to be motivated? You know, some of your writings, you talk about that, right? Don't try to motivate the unmotivated, right?
Yep.
But I struggle with that because I'm trying to make my staff better. I'm trying to make people better. And, you know, sometimes my wife and people, just leave, back it up a little bit. Tell me about when people might not be so receptive.
Is that Italian in you? Is that Italian? You just want to like...
Yes. Give them some pasta and wine and make it better.
Hey, there you go. There you go. Well, I get to work, generally speaking, with a lot of motivated leaders. Now, there are some situations where I get called in to deal with someone. They didn't call me. The organization called me. But I really think, it's a great question, Andrew. And I think talking to them about what they want and what's in it for them and where they want to go, and make sure that where they want to go is aligned with the organization and where the organization wants to go. I think that helps. But, there's this, how can I help you as a coach, right? How can I help you get where you want to go? Now, if you don't want to go anywhere, then, I can kick you in the pants, but I'm not sure it's going to be that helpful.
And they won't be hiring the freak if they're not looking to go somewhere. People hire you, they want you to take them to the next level.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like that line in Jerry Maguire, right? You remember the movie Jerry Maguire?
A little bit. Don't ask me anything too specific.
Help me help you. He's
there
screaming with the football player. Yeah, I'm going to add that to my routine. Dan, again, as a high school principal, one of the things that I've struggled with in terms of trying to motivate people, trying to create change, suggestion, recommendation, and direct. I'm directing you to do this. Yeah. Sometimes, you make a suggestion and, they can take it or leave it, right? Hey, I'd like you to try this. I suggest you, but they don't do it. The next time it's a little more firm, maybe a recommendation, until it gets to the point where, hey, I'm directing you to do this. How do you, in your role, whether it was in some of your past jobs, where's that line where you got to now switch it because you're not seeing the results?
Yeah, well, I think you nailed it right there. The tension between, for me, curiosity and being directive has to do with their results. How are they doing? They may need greater intervention. So it may be that it's an experience issue. It may be a training issue. It may be a confidence issue. And so when results start to dip, this is a leader's responsibility now to step in and become a little more interventionist. So, and one of the things to do would be, depending on who the person is, if they're not getting where they need to go, and so you're going to intervene, is set these timelines up. So, hey, it would be a tighter timeline for this intervention. So someone's not doing well, and okay, let's touch base Friday. And then when you touch base Friday, say, let's touch base next Friday. Now, if it's a highly motivated employee and they're doing great, it's like once a month you have a one-on-one and check on where they are and what you can do for them, what you can get out of the way for them. But if they're not quite so motivated, you get involved a little more intentionally and a little more frequently.
And you talk about, hey, next Friday. One of the things, Dan, in talking and writing this book, so much of it is about time management. And I know you wrote, there's no such thing as time management. There's only time.
Yeah.
But if that's not on my schedule, if I'm not doing it, it gets away from you. So one of the things that we focus on is the feedback loop, right? The following up. You asked to see something. It's important for the leader then to hold the person accountable, but to physically make the time to come back in and check with Dan Rockwell. Hey, Dan, tell me about the progress you've made on this. If you don't schedule that appointment, it kind of goes by the wayside. And so does your recommendation.
So you sit down, you have a conversation, and if there is a good, reasonable amount of motivation and skill there, you say, well, what would you like to do next? You give them the option. and they say, by the way, you want to generate 2 or 3 options, 3 options. What could you do next? Well, okay. What else could you do next? Okay. What else could you? Now you got 3 things. Then you say, which one would you like to do next? See, now they're in choice. They're making a choice. They feel powerful. That's going to energize them. Now, if they don't have that experience, then you could just say, okay, here's what I would suggest you would do between now and our next meeting, right? How does that look to you? What would you, with this in mind, what are your next steps, and get them going? But then you say, okay, we're going to get together on Friday, and you might say, I'm going to ask you 4 questions. I'm going to ask you, I want you to know ahead of time. I'm going to ask you, what did you do, right? What did you try? What did you do, right? How did it work? Tell me what the results were. What did you learn? And then the 4th question is, what do you want to try next? So they know right ahead of time what the accountability is all about. Now, if they're highly motivated, you can just ask them, what do you want to do next, right? And then I'll ask them, what do you want me to ask you the next time we meet? That way they set their own accountability. But if they're not highly motivated, you might need to do it a little more intentional.
And, as the principal, I dig that style. I like it. One of the things I try to do is remove the fear of people getting in trouble. If they don't do it, they're going to get in trouble. We're doing this to try to get you better. If people know that feedback is coming from a sincere, authentic point of trying to make you better, you remove that fear of, well, if I don't do this, I'm going to get in trouble. Right. We try not to have that. Right. Then again, talking about feedback, one of the things I like about your the blog. First of all, where did the 300 words or less come from? I think that's a great concept.
Yeah, great question. So everything you see on Leadership Freak on the blog is for me. I'm the audience. I write that for me. Lots of times I'm trying to solve my own concerns and problems, or I'm trying to clarify what I think about something. And so I have a short attention span. So I just 300 words was like, you know what? I'm comfortable with 300 words. You start going long and it's like, I don't know.
Well, and you keep your audience that way too. You click on the button, boom, it's there. You can read it in just a few minutes. And again, your content is fantastic. But the other thing I like, if you keep scrolling down, so many people will write a reaction. How long do you stay there after you release it to respond to that? Because that's nice. You got the freak, you write something, the freak writes back to you.
Yeah, I love the comments, and there's a cadre of people who leave some great comments, very insightful comments, sometimes more, sometimes less, but depends on the day. Sometimes I'm traveling, it's very difficult, so the post I write every day, and sometimes I actually have to schedule it so that it goes out without me being in front of the computer. So if I can be, I love to be here and respond to people. Generally by 9 o'clock, the best is post between 7 and 8 a.m. Generally around 9 o'clock or so. I like to get out there and take a look and respond if I can. I do love to do that. I don't always get to because of the schedule.
Yeah, it's cool when you do it though, and you can see what your audience is.
Love that.
Yeah. Speaking of writing, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I looked, I kind of Googled around, have you written a book, or, are you a book author yet?
No, the best I got for you is I did contribute to a book called The Character-Based Leader, right? I wrote a chapter on humility in that, and I'm quoted in books. Does that help?
So I'm going to ask you here, we're live on the radio, is that something that you're looking to do? And or you got to be somebody knocking at your door saying, Dan, this, let's go here.
Yeah, I've had such a great opportunity. Yeah, I've had people approach me. I've had agents approach me, people who work with, if I named them, you would know exactly who they are. And, just so fortunate. It has not been something, at least for quite a while, that I was highly motivated about. Mm-hmm. Plus, I do not have a long attention span. So I've started like 12 books, but I just don't have, that drive to work through. I am working on a book right now, and that's a good experience. And I'm giving myself permission to use some stuff I've already written, and just kind of get that out and do something. See, to me, I want to do something that I feel like would be useful to leaders on a day-to-day basis. I don't want a lot of theory. I just want to be useful. And so I am working on something right now.
And it's interesting having this conversation with you. I wrote my first book before I started my blog and the radio program, and I had time to do it. I am working on my second book now. For all of our listeners, it's going to be called The Parent, Surviving and Thriving. But some of the feedback I've gotten, Dan, is that the book is short snippets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Little steps, short things. And, you know, I'm sure if you go back through your podcast, I mean, your blogs, there'll be some stuff there, but your content is great. So I highly recommend it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the things I also wanted to ask you about, more personal in your own life, you know, for you, is there a time in your life, Dan, where you were cruising along Highway A and everything was going great and you had a paradigm shift? Something came your way and you kind of changed your mindset, you know, your thoughts. Have you had a paradigm shift that's been impactful in your life?
Who hasn't? You know, I hope anyway, right? But yes, yeah. And I actually remember it. It was in July, and you know, I'm a huge fan of midlife crisis. I think we ought to have a lot of them. And generally speaking, I mean, I don't want you to unbutton your shirt, wear a gold chain, buy a convertible, and divorce your wife. I don't want that. But, you know, I think we ought to have a lot of these shifts. And there is some research that suggests approximately on the decade markers, life shifts for us. Like, for example, when you go to college at around 20, life shifts, you know, and around 30, you know, maybe you're going to get married. And, you know, anyway, yeah, I was 50. And I can remember I took a month off, and I can remember sitting on our deck, which I love to do, and especially breakfast or whatever. And I had been very dissatisfied. And this is what happens, I think, in these shifts, is we do some self-reflection. We look at ourselves and we think, you have more in you. You're a little disappointing in this area. You've fallen below what you thought you could do. And that's what was going on for me. And I think here's what came out of that, Andrew. The journey of life is learning to define yourself by who you are, by how God made you, rather than by what other people expect from you. And we grow, we please our parents, we please our teachers, we please our boss. I mean, that's life. In the whole process, I think we tend to lose ourselves a little bit. And so the journey, I like to say, the journey of life is learning to define yourself by who you are. And I can remember sitting on the deck and just all of a sudden realizing, I don't need all of that. I don't need the college. I don't need the things I'm doing. I don't need any. Now, I wanted some of it, but I didn't have to be afraid of losing it. And that really changed my life.
Wow. And you were out there by yourself, or was your wife with you?
Well, yeah, I don't remember the day exactly, but it had been an ongoing process. And sometimes these shifts can take a year, 2 years. And the research shows that we kind of gradually ramp up to a crisis moment. So it takes quite a long time for the discomfort and the pain to kind of get to the place where there's a breakthrough moment. Now, some people don't break through. They just keep circling the dissatisfaction. I think we all know people like that. The guy who, he lives in the garage now. You know what I mean? He's left his family and kind of disassociated with it. But anyway, when you gradually, it can take a while, right? A year or so to ramp up to this moment, but all of a sudden it resolves itself. That's what happened to me. And I think this happens to us. All of a sudden, this moment of like, hey, I don't need their approval. I enjoy it, but I don't need to define myself by my job. I can be who I am.
Great stuff, Dan. How about a failure? Something, I've learned leadership. I've learned, it's not the amount of times that you fail that counts. It's the amount of times you succeed. Yeah. Have you had something in your life that was a setback that you brought things to perspective for you?
I think there's a series of, there's a pattern for me of failure in being so consumed with what I want to do and not really appreciating others. I'll give you an example of this. In general, I think there's this, I get out of touch with people because I'm thinking about what I want to do, and that tends to strain relationships. And the other thing that happens is because I tend to be an idea person, a dreamer kind of person, I drive doers crazy, right? Because I don't finish enough things. I've got all kinds of ideas, and my doer friends, they feel they have a strong need to finish. I have a strong need to start stuff. They have a strong need to finish stuff and check it off the list. And I think about a lot of wasted time in my life has been spent frustrated with the doers in my life. And I remember not that long ago, just a few years ago, all of a sudden thinking, where would you be without these doers in your life? And not very far, right? And all of a sudden I started to realize, those people, I call them foot draggers, because they got to have the plan before they start. I don't need the plan. We'll figure it out, right? And so they got to have the plan. And and all of a sudden I realized they're not foot draggers. And my friend Tim said to me, who is a fantastic doer, like a brother to me, but he has for so long had been such a frustration to me. And he said, Dan, I just need to see the path forward. When I see the path, I'm fine. And he's the kind of guy, once he sees the path, you can't stop that guy. Yeah. But he won't start until he can see the path and the goal. Hey, somebody come, let's go, man. We'll figure it out. And, it's not the end of the world if we don't get there. I mean, heck, we'll get somewhere.
Now it's coming into perspective why your stuff, I can resonate with your stuff. And I'm of that. Let's build it. Let's do just the way you started your blog, right? You just started writing it. The way I started this radio broadcast, we'll figure it out.
Figure it out. Yep. I call it building the plane in the air, right? Drives all the doers nuts.
Dan, leadership, the work you're doing, the writing, the travel, the speaking. I write in my book about the old blue chair. I'm a guy from Staten Island, but I love country music. Kenny Chesney writes about his old blue chair, right? In the Virgin Islands, a place where he could go to get away from it all. He writes his music there. Where is that place for you in your life?
Yes. We do travel, and my wife travels with me some, and occasionally what we'll do is tag on a few days. We went to LA, and then we went out to Catalina Island for a few days. So we might, tag on to a trip a little extra. We were down in West Palm Beach in the wintertime. So,
not a bad place to be.
So, right. I mean, hey. And so we spent a few days, here or there. In the summertime, and we're just almost here in central Pennsylvania. When I'm home, I want to have breakfast out on the deck. I want to have dinner out on the deck. I want to put my feet up on a hassock there and sit in that chair and eat a steak and, have a cigar and just relax.
That sounds great. I'll wait for the invitation in the mail to when that comes. Meet Mrs. Rockwell, because that sounds great. Dan, we're coming to the portion of the program. It's the rapid fire. It's a fan favorite. But before we get there, you write so much stuff on leadership. It's great. I'm eating it up. If you had to give me 3 characteristics, if you had to write the blog about the top 3, right? Yeah, you talked about sports before. They always talk about the Mount Rushmore of basketball, the Mount Rushmore. If you only had 3, what would the top 3 characteristics of leadership be?
Like of a leader, you mean? What you're looking for? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So apart from you get these base things like integrity, right? Those kind of things. I'm not going to talk about them. The first one is curiosity. So I was in Omaha, Nebraska doing something, and Gallup is there. And one of the HR people was in the audience, and they asked the question, what's the number one thing you like to look for in leaders? And so apart from those fundamental core things, curiosity. I want to hear people. I was just in Oklahoma, and having at lunch, one of the leaders leaned over to me and he started asking me questions. And that's so rare. That's so rare. Everybody wants to tell things. So I love to see the curiosity thing. I think also, and curiosity leads me to the second one, that's forward facing. A forward-facing orientation. It's so easy to get sucked into the past. Problems are something that already happened. They're in the past. So I'm not saying you should ignore problems. I'm just saying the solution to problems is not found in the past. It's found in the present and the future. And so I want to see leaders who, I have this forward-facing orientation, and then I write a lot about energy and positive energy and managing energy. And so the third quality would be, you could call it optimism, you could call it a positive energy, or just plain energy, but that's the third thing.
I love it. One of the tips I'm going to put in my book, again, from my friend Dr. Gilbert, the sports psychologist, every parent comes home and asks, how was school today? I've started asking my kids, did you ask a question today?
Yeah.
What was the question you asked today? Because the other kids have the question. They're just a little afraid to ask.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What question did you ask today?
Great
I
stuff.
heard somebody say, how did you fail today? It's another question. Isn't that a great question to ask a kid? How did you fail?
I got a lot of answers for that question. Here we go, Dan. Are you ready? We're going to rapid fire.
All right, we'll give it a try. All
right, it's a rainy day out here in Pennsylvania, but let's get to it. I know you read a lot. Last book you read?
So I'm just almost finishing, almost done with The Power of a Positive No. The Power of a Positive No. Great book.
Okay. How many books do you read a year?
Probably about 100, I would say, something like that. It depends, because you're not on an airplane. What are you going to do, right?
I'm going to write that book.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks.
Last movie you saw?
Black Panther.
Okay. Out of 10. Give me out of 10. 10, 1.
I thought it was good. I didn't think it was great.
Okay.
It's funny. My friends are all mad at me because I didn't think it was fantastic, but I did like it. I thought it was good. And I have, it's funny because we had a black friend of mine and I were having a conversation, and he's African. And it was so good to hear him talk about it and how he felt about it, because it was very empowering. So I just thought that was great.
Who is the Leadership Freaks mentor?
Yeah, the leader I'm with. So I'm always learning from people that I'm with. I get to hang around with great leaders. And so the leader I'm with, now I'm coached by Bob Hancock. He's taught me about coaching, and he's my coach. He's one of the top Canadian coaches. But as far as a mentor go, it's really probably the leader I'm with.
Favorite place to travel?
Well, we're Maine folk, and it's great to get back to Maine, but we like to get where the water is. So I think I mentioned like Catalina Island, or if we go down to the Outer Banks, or if we're in Florida, right, in the wintertime, we're going to get on the ocean. The
legacy that you would like to leave for the Leadership Freak?
If you read the Twitter bio, it says, I really hope that when people see me, they say that guy made my life better.
The accomplishment that you are most proud?
Long and happy marriage. I've been married over 40 years, married my high school sweetheart, and she's the joy of my life. And I can't imagine she travels with me, like I said, sometimes. And so that's what I'm really proud of.
That's a beautiful answer. Best thing about the Little League World Series?
I think, I knew the guy who founded Little League, Carl Stutz, right?
Wow.
And I love that, for example, that the parents before Little League, did not sit around watching their kids play baseball. The kids went out in the field and played baseball. And so we realize now that things like the family connections that happen, our butts are all flat because we're sitting on bleachers watching some 5-year-old who can't do anything cheering. Well, why is that? That's because of Carl Stutz. And so the favorite thing about Little League for me is the family connections.
And what happens to the town for that month?
Oh, my word. Nobody goes anywhere around. All the locals. I live out of town. Hey, Williamsport is 30,000 people. I'm a country boy. That's way too big for me. We live 10 miles out of town on top of one of the hills. So we don't go in town except for games or something like that.
You'll go to some ball games every year?
Oh, yeah. Not necessarily every year, but we do go. Yep. And on TV is fine. I'm getting used to the TV thing.
Okay. Biggest achievement of someone that you've coached?
It's interesting because I coach for different reasons. Some leaders have kind of lost themselves. They've lost their joy. And so, I might coach a COO who has kind of lost themselves in the work. And to help them rediscover their authentic leadership, that's a fantastic privilege. I also coach leaders who might be at the director level and they want to get to the corporate table. And so I've coached leaders in organizations who, to help them get to that. And that's always rewarding too.
If you can have dinner with 3 people from any point in history, who would they be?
Love my dad, and he passed away. And I found out just 2 or 3 years ago that he actually adopted me. My mom is my mom, but I lived all my life thinking my dad was my biological dad, but he wasn't. And it was a really strange experience, but still, that's just what I think of him. He's, he's my dad, Walter Rockwell, and I would want my dad there because he was. I learned so much from him. So I'd want my dad there, and I would want Jesus would be so fascinating to talk to, and John Adams. I've read about John Adams quite a lot, and the early American history and all of that kind of stuff. He was so frustrated with things. He was kind of an angry guy, and his wife kind of tried to soothe him a little bit. I would love to talk to John Adams.
Wow, you'd have that dinner on the deck.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story about your father there.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have to tell you. Never one time in my life did he ever hint that he was not my biological father. And that was because that's what Mom wanted. She grew up in an era when having a child out of wedlock was, really kind of frowned on and embarrassing, and a lot, her family went to church and all of that. And she was never really comfortable with that, letting that out. And so Dad said to her, she told me later, just again a couple of years ago, she told me that Dad he thought I should know. So when I got to about 13, he said we should sit down and talk to Danny. That's my real name, Danny. And she was not comfortable and never was comfortable. He died, and I never knew that he was not my biological father. He was that kind of person where, when he said what he was going to do, that's what he would do. He was hardworking and disciplined, and I just really respect him.
Beautiful story. You've had a number of those today.
Thank you.
Dan, we got one more question for you. We're going to wrap it up. It's been a privilege to speak with you. Great stuff. I'm in the business of young people, Dan, working with them every day. I have teachers that are motivating these kids. And what advice would you give to my staff, high school leaders, high school teachers, to help develop young leaders, to bring the best out in them? What advice would you give?
Yeah. There's 2 or 3 things going through my mind. One is I would want to hear them tell their stories. And I've started doing this with teams. I would want to hear them tell their stories, and then I would say back to them what I see in them as a result of that story. So they might say, I remember, playing. I had a governmental leader out in Seattle say, well, my older brother and his friends used to tie me and my friends to trees and shoot us with hoses, right? You could get arrested today for that, right? And so he's telling the story, and and I asked the group, say something about this person, and then I said to him, I wonder if you're a real protector of people. You could see his eyes kind of light up, and it's like, I never thought about that before. And he saw himself in a new way. And if you can help students see themselves, their authentic self, what's driving them, listen to their story and say, I wonder if this isn't important to you. And if you might not be good at that, you may not be right, but you can just start talking. And I kid you not. I did this in Oklahoma last week. People, their eyes get big and they start getting energy. So I think, first of all, help them find their authentic self. And then don't help them. Give them something to do and don't help them so much. I get so frustrated with, when people step in, let people struggle. They learn to respect themselves. Now you can watch if they turn angry, if you see them getting discouraged, you want to stay available, ready to help, but do not reach in there. Let them work on that. When they come to you, don't give them quick answers. So what do you think? Well, what other options? And they'll say, I don't know. And then you're going to say, well, who might know? Who could you go and talk to? Right? You figure out the answer. You can't make leaders by holding their hand all the time. So I'm just so passionate about get them to figure out who they are and what's motivating them, give them a job, and don't help them.
I could hear the passion in your voice. It's coming out. You're getting pumped up here.
I got to settle down. Sorry.
Dan, we're going to end with one of your quotes here. Not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. Did I say that right?
Pretty close. That's actually Truman, isn't it? But that's a good one.
Yeah. Harry Truman. It was featured in your blog the other day, and we're going to end with that quote. I do want to, again, give a thank you to our sponsor. Dan, if you don't subscribe to this or you haven't seen it, it's great stuff. The Coaching and Leadership Journal. It's written by my friend Dan Spanauer in North Carolina, and he is found at the Leadership Publishing Team. You could check that out online. You get an electronic version, and you get this hard copy. It is several pages long. If you look at it, it's great stuff. And again, Dan, that's where I found some of your stuff featured in there. Dan is offering a discount for the Education, Leadership, and Beyond listeners. That's ELB 20 on the website leadershippublishingteam.com. Dan, we're going to end here. And next week's guest coming up on Education, Leadership, and Beyond, another friend of mine, Dr. Stephen Burchek. He is a psychologist at the College of St. Rose, a great guy. So, Dan, we're going to sign off.
Thank you.
I'll be looking for your blog tomorrow morning, and I look forward to connecting with you further.
Thank you.
We're going to cue up our music here. We're trying to figure this all out live and here, so we're going to end. Go out and change the world for the better, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to our live audience on Facebook and as well as our audience on iTunes. Leave us a review. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review on iTunes, on Amazon if you like the book. And again, go out and change the world for the better, everyone. Thanks. Let me get this music queued up. Here we go.